The opinions expressed on the following audio program are solely those of the host and the guests. Burner Podcast is an independently produced, not-for-profit show and is not associated with the Burning Man organization or its subsidiaries. The views expressed are not representative of the entire Burning Man community and are presented here for entertainment purposes only. In short, calm the fuck down. It's just a podcast.
Episode number 20. Finally got a round number in there. Number 20. That's 2 tens. 2 decades. It's not really decades, but the man burns in 353 days as of this recording. What a burn that was. What an amazing experience. As you probably well know, unless you've been hiding under a rock on Pluto, most of us are just still coming back to the default world after our adventure out to Black Rock City. A lot of us are still readjusting. Here in Southern California, we got hit by rainstorms. I saw Burner Podcast alumni Tom Burton, Captain Tom of the Black Rock Observatory, post about how all of his Burning Man shit got rained on. He put a photo of it out there, so that fucking sucks. I'm having the same problem. I'm actually literally looking outside of my window and seeing a lot of my stuff is covered in rainwater. So, boo-hoo. I guess a lot of us are dealing with that. We need some of that rain here in California, as they keep saying, though I'm not sure how much this little bit of drizzle from the sky is going to really do for our drought. But let's not go down that depressing rabbit hole. It really was an amazing burn. As with all burns, there were extreme ups and there were downs. Personally, I can tell you that I have not experienced one iota of post-burn blues. I mean, I'm just feeling like $1,000,000. I have a little skip in my step, little tap in my shoe. I feel great. Sometimes people say like it's, you didn't party hard enough. Like, no, I feel fantastic. I feel rested. I feel focused, energetic. My mind is clear. And you know what? We're going to get into a lot of this stuff. As I mentioned in the previous episodes, worked on the Wonderlust Arcade project, which was at the foot of the man over there in the Midway. And we were building on Saturday, in full-on whiteout conditions. My eyes are burning. Everybody is just completely covered in dust, which, you've been in the culture just a little too long when people look extra sexy to you when they're covered in dust. But a lot of us, everybody was out there building all these different regionals. We had New York right next to us, Baltimore around the corner. Japan Burn was right next to producer Meg's team. She was working on the Dr. Hayes Balls Boardwalk Soul Exchange, which was the other San Diego regional project. We all really did get our asses kicked, and it was a beautiful ass kicking. We all felt amazing doing it. Meg has tons of stories to tell about all the stuff that happened with her camp. Sad news was Tanasi, our online editor, his grandmother passed while he was out on Playa. And he got the message from Black Rock Rangers and said that they really, I believe the Rangers were the ones that brought him the message. I'm not sure actually, but there was a couple of situations like that. We had another good friend of ours actually found out that his mother passed away. Tanasi, we're going to get into all these stories actually on the next episode of this very show. We're going to have a little round table with myself, producer Meg, our online editor Tanasi, our music editor Navjeet, who had a moment with the legendary Carl Cox. So we want to go ahead and get that story. We're just going to basically kick back and maybe have some whiskey and go through our stories and report back on all that we accomplished at Burning Man. We actually didn't accomplish anywhere near as much as we were planning, but it'll be a show regardless. We're going to have a team recap show. In fact, we were going to have this episode be the recap, the show immediately following the burn. But Tanasi had to go back home to deal with some of those family affairs. And he will be back, and we're going to record that interview. And the next episode will be all the details of what happened to the Burner Podcast crew out on Playa. And we have a new team member as well, which we'll announce soon. So the team continues to expand. It's been, God, it's so wonderful to have everybody out there. But I'm going to shut up. I'm not going to talk about it anymore. We're going to talk about it on next show. We're just going to go ahead and get right into today's subject. The interview is one of the longer ones because there's so much fascinating shit to cover. But our guest today is Dr. Thomas K. Brown, a.k.a. Kingsley. Dr. Brown, a.k.a. Kingsley, has been has worked with MAPS, which I'm going to give you guys just a second to guess it. Come on, if you're a real burner, you know exactly what that acronym is. The Multidisciplinary Psychedelic... Wait, hold on. I forgot it already. Multidisciplinary Association of Psychedelic Sciences. There you go. MAPS. Good old MAPS. If you're in and around this community, you probably hear that acronym referred to quite often. I was introduced to Kingsley through one of my very good friends, one of my best friends, Myra, who I have this very hippy-dippy, deep spiritual connection with that we have a difficult time describing to a lot of people. But there's something very much there. Like if there is a past lifetime thing or whatever, like we probably knew each other or whatever. Gemstones and love and light and all that other bullshit. But yeah, Myra, good friend, had been telling me for a while. Myra had let's go back to the beginning. Myra had volunteered for the MAPS annual conference, and she is working towards her PhD so that she can do psychedelic research as well. And I had told her for a while I would love to get someone from MAPS on this show. And Myra immediately suggested Kingsley. Kingsley had been doing research with ibogaine, which is a substance that I was not familiar with until probably the week before we recorded this interview, and I had to get Kingsley's questionnaire in here and prepare for the show. But ibogaine, I mean, it's almost the... God, I hope I don't get chewed out for this. It almost seems like it's the African equivalent to DMT. It seems like in various parts of our beautiful planet, we do have these highly potent hallucinogens that seem to serve varying purposes. The majority of which being, of course, medicine. They are from the shaman rituals of different parts of our globe. Ibogaine, I believe, originated in Africa. Again, I could be wrong about this, as I always say on the intro of every show, as I'm giving you this information. But that is what I've read about it, and we're gonna get into all the information of what ibogaine is. Kingsley, of course, being a veteran burner, is going to walk us through sort of what ibogaine is, what its healing properties are, what the effects of it are, and the way that it is being utilized in clinics around the world today in order to treat addiction. It's a pretty fascinating subject, and Kingsley is impossible not to love, and we absolutely loved recording this episode of the show. Producer Meg was so geeked out about Kingsley coming in that she went ahead and invited herself onto the show as well. So if you listeners at home are playing the Producer Meg reference shot game, the one whenever I reference Producer Meg or Producer Meg's brother Paul, you take a shot. Go ahead and just chug the whole fucking bottle right now. Get that one out of the way, because Meg will be in on this one. We're gonna double team Kingsley. The sandwich of geek questions and nerdery and all that other awesomeness. And this is the part where I'm starting to run out of words to say, and we're just going to go ahead and get right into the interview with Kingsley, which is one that I'm very excited about. And coincidentally, this was actually going to be the one that I was going to have released while we were away at the burn. But Burning Man happened. And on our drive out towards Black Rock City, it all of a sudden dawned on me that I had not clicked certain buttons in order to make sure you get the show. So that's okay. I mean, it was producer Meg's idea initially to actually take a hiatus while we all go to Burning Man. And I fought against it for some silly ass reason. And then the universe decided that we are taking a hiatus whether I like it or not. So anyway, here's that episode. The one that you should have listened to if you hadn't gone to Burning Man, or you would have listened to on your drive back. Kingsley. I go by Mr. Arash, even though nobody calls me Mr. Welcome to Burner Podcast.
On the first part of the journey, I was looking at all the life. There were plants and birds and rocks and things. There was sand and hills and rain. The first thing I met was the fly with the balls and the sky with no clouds. The heat was hot and the ground was dry, but the air was full of sound. I've been through the desert on a horse with no name. It felt good to be out of the rain. In the desert, you can't remember your name, 'cause there ain't no one for to give you no name.
So was he actually certain that there's no cactus?
Either he was so screwed up that he was positive there was no cactus, or he really thought there was no cactus in Utah. I don't know which one it was. Our altered state of mind did not contribute to. I know you're recording.
I am, yes.
Oh, you are recording.
Our altered state of mind did not allow for us to have clarity.
Yeah.
As to why we were having this particular argument. I mean, it's how Jake and I talk to each other. We get all impassioned about something and just yell about it for an hour and a half, 2 hours. And this time it was about cactus.
Yeah.
There's totally fucking cactus in Utah.
Kingsley, is there a cactus in Utah?
I would think there is, actually. Having heard that story, but I think I would have guessed that there was cactus in Utah anyway.
Why is that? Is there something about your knowledge of cactus?
There's a hell of a lot of desert in Utah.
It's a desert!
Yeah.
So where is there not cactus? Do we have anywhere in the country where there isn't cactus?
Oh, I think a lot of it in northern and
I don't
eastern
remember ever
parts of the
seeing
country.
cactus outside of a plant shop like in Illinois.
Yeah, I think,
It's too wet.
just growing natively, I would think it wouldn't exist anywhere outside of the West.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh.
Even
Can't
Pacific
imagine there's
Northwest,
cactus, like
probably.
in Alaska or something.
Yeah, and probably not in Oregon or Utah. I mean, not Utah. Utah wouldn't have
Utah.
any cactus. Oregon or Washington wouldn't have any cactus either, I would think.
No, actually,
Idaho.
there's high desert in both Oregon and Washington. I used to live outside of a town called Tabasket, and we totally had cactus there.
Oh, wow. Huh.
Yeah, we have. This is the amusing part: is that I've absolutely lost track of how many conversations we've gotten into with these circles, where you can't even figure out where it started or why one person is arguing one side or the other.
Yeah.
And then it's like not only just even like random silly shit either. Like people will start like pulling out statistics. There's like information. It turns out somebody has studied cactus at some point and can like give you all the background on that. So
I actually have some cactus in my pocket right now. Here, have
cactus.
some.
Proof cactus.
Got some.
You brought us beer,
I
Kingsley.
did. Yeah, I got two different kinds of beer.
What'd you bring?
They're both domestic. I think that U.S. beer is among the best in the world at this point.
Damn, because
So I've
having
got-
consumed dinner at his house, I was hoping for something in like some unmarked bottle that occasionally pops up at like New Year's.
Yeah,
Well, this is-
so Sierra Nevada Nooner Pilsner, which I've never had, but Sierra Nevada and it's Pilsner, and Dogfish Head Indian Brown Ale, which I have had.
That sounds good.
So-
I'll have one of those.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
I'll
Meg, would
test
you like
out
one?
that Sierra Nevada.
Excellent. I think I'll go with that to begin with, anyway.
Okay,
not
except
that
I'm a girl and I can't do the bottle cap trick.
Oh, yeah.
No, we're
Actually,
I-
pass me a bottle
yeah.
opener.
I have a bottle cap. I have a bottle opener that has never been used before.
I'm a guy. I can't do the bottle cap thing with the
Yeah.
wire.
Really, I just usually attribute it to my genitalia.
I attribute most things to my genitalia,
I
but
know that about you.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to cook dinner, and immediately I'm trying to find a way to include my genitalia in that process.
Right.
So that's the
Coming to your
thing
house
that
for dinner.
I've
Yeah.
kind of
Okay,
I don't blame
practiced
you.
myself out of that with a couple of kids. I don't
Yeah.
usually bring up genitalia at the dinner table.
Oh,
but,
salute.
Yeah. Salute.
Thank you so
Cheers.
much.
Prost.
Thank you. There we go. Excellent.
Throw that back.
Well, Kingsley, you going to Burn this year? Oh, that's fucking
Yes, I
delicious.
am. Yeah, just decided a couple weeks ago that I was going to go, and I'd ordered tickets back in like November,
Yeah.
and they arrived a week ago, and I went and picked them up at the post office, and I'm going to go with the person that I've been with most often, which is and that person is Serotonin. Do you know her? Either of you?
I don't know.
I know. That's a great name, though.
Yeah, it's a really good name. And she deserves that name for sure.
Is her name Sarah by any chance?
No, it's not. It's actually Kristen.
Okay. That would have been way radder if like it was like Sarah and then you just added the tone into it.
Oh, yeah, indeed.
What year will this be for you?
This will be my 13th time to the playa. Yeah, I've missed 2 times since 2001.
My God.
So, yeah.
Did you, okay, so were those, it sounds like you're saying missed, like that was not on purpose. You just had no choice but to not go.
Well, no, it was really my choice not to go. And 2006, my partner Gaia went and I didn't. And neither of us was going to go that year, actually, because it was not clear. Her sister was dying from cancer, and we didn't think either of us was going to go to the playa. And then her sister died, and I think it was either June or July. And okay, Gaia's going to go, and she's going to go to the playa. So she went, and I didn't. And then 2013. No, was it 2013? 2014. Neither of us went.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was 2013.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was your first year? What took you out there the first time?
2001. So I'd heard of Burning Man from a roommate of mine who was Canadian and never been to Burning Man, but I lived with him about a year earlier, and he was talking about Burning Man, and it sounded pretty cool. And then I think it was around April of 2001, I was talking with a close friend of mine, and he said, "Oh, I'm going to Burning Man," and said, "Hey, can I go with you?" "Yeah, sure, okay." And it was back when it was really easy to get tickets, and I think there were probably around 15,000 people on the playa that year.
Wow!
And it was my friend Greg, who goes by, his name keeps changing, but he's Stroke Greg, or he goes by Face Touch or Heart Touch. He lives up at Puhonua, that place up in Escondido.
We know Touch very well.
Touch, yeah. So it was him.
Touch has been mentioned on this show several times, by the way.
Touch is at the board
Not surprisingly.
right now.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So he has long arms that reach everywhere.
Yes.
And one of the most incredible intellects of anybody I've ever met. That guy is amazing.
Oh, absolutely. The first time I really had a conversation with Touch, I was spending the night at their place, which I can never pronounce correctly. Puhonua. Yeah. I was spending the night there, and in the morning I had to drive to LA because we had a couple of other podcasts scheduled. And so Finn, who's a friend of ours, ended up going home that night, and she gave up her space there for me to spend the night inside the house so that I could kind of wake up in the morning and be fresh so I can go function rather than staying up all night. I need the brain to kind of work a little bit when I do this. Like not a lot. It's like a little bit. And so I'm kind of like on the floor and I'm kind of getting my bed ready, and I don't think I'd met Touch yet. And he kind of came in and he's completely naked. and he's like, "Oh, are you okay? Is there anything I can help you with?" And I say, "Oh yeah, and I explained that, I'd spoken to Finn and she said it was fine." He's like, "Oh yeah." He's like, "No problem, you're fine, no worries." And then so he kind of just crouches down next to me in his glorious nudity and proceeds to talk to me about my Persian background, and he's quoting like Hafiz and like Persian quotes, poetry and stuff. So this exchange goes on for like a good 20 minutes, 25 minutes.
Yep.
And it was just like a very amusing situation where it's like the way that you meet people in this community, it's usually in these kind of like very strange and bizarre surroundings.
First time I met Touch, he thought I was someone else, and I was really super new to the community, and it was my very first splash up, actually, and it was I was literally, or splash down. It was splash down because it was after the burn, but before my first Utopia, and he thought I was somebody else, and comes up and gives me one of those all-encompassing, down at your level, sucking you in black hole of a hug things.
That's what he does, yeah.
And I'm just like, yeah. Hey, hippie guy, what up? And then he looked at me and he's like, "You're not whoever it was that he thought I was."
This is Meg previous to the shaved side of head being
way before I didn't
all the
have
insanity.
All this
there may be some correlation
color
there.
then. It was very strange.
Can I say though, Kingsley, you look very normal.
Well, Serotonin has commented that actually I'm in disguise most of the time, so I have this outlook of somebody who's really white bread, and And that's how I am at work. And actually, the fact that I'm wearing a T-shirt today, that's not usual for me at work, but this is how I was dressed at work today. But
we're proud of
when
you.
I'm in my
We
work
need you to
drag,
blend
I
in.
look even more normal, I think, than I do right now. Yeah, so I keep a lot hidden, you know, and until I get into my environment, you know, my people are around, you know. So.
Yeah. So that the very first year you went in 2001, you said there was a Canadian roommate. Was this here in San Diego or?
Yeah. And the Canadian roommate, I don't think has probably still not been to Burning Man, but he was the first one who ever mentioned it to me, as far as I can recall. Mm-hmm. But yeah, then Greg said, "Oh, I'm going to Burning Man," and so yeah. It was he and I and 3 other guys packed into this Volvo station wagon with as much stuff as we could possibly pack underneath the big tarp and strap on top of the car, you know. And
And in that, so I mean, there's just no other way to ask this question. Like, were you one of the weirdos already? Like, do you think you were already very much off the mainstream, or was this sort of what opened you up?
I think, you know, I've thought of myself as being as weird for a long time, you know, but I didn't really embrace my weirdness until I started going to Burning Man. Yeah. And I really, you know, allowed myself to just be whatever, you know, or whoever at that point. I think I was much more, I don't know, I think I was less expressive at that point. I didn't think of myself as an artist. Like, you know, the first couple of years at Burning Man, thought, you know, those other people are artists. I'm not an artist, but it took me a few years to realize, okay, yeah, I'm an artist in different ways than I would have thought of people being artistic, and I'm definitely a weirdo.
Yeah.
So,
what is an artist?
Somebody who I guess it's an artist. I think someone who can frame normality in a way that allows people to see normal reality as being magnificent.
Yeah, there was a really interesting way that Alan Watts described it. And he was saying it as like, he was basically arguing that it's a lot more fun to live this life if you have some sort of discipline. Like something that you're working towards. Yeah. And he was saying the example he was giving is, you could be, maybe one night you are extremely high on acid and you see the meaning of life in the bottom of an ashtray. And then you take a picture of it and you show it to people. Yeah. And people look at it and say, well, it's a fucking dirty ashtray. Like, what are you showing me here? But I think it's kind of like what you're describing, that ability to take something that might be ordinary or even ugly and finding a way to see the beauty in it and having a way to communicate that thing to people who might not see the same thing that you do.
Yeah. My friend Serotonin, like I'll bring her up many times probably during this conversation, but I think she's a photographer among other things, and it's remarkable to me that she can, when I see a photo of hers, I see things that I wouldn't have noticed looking at that same thing that she took a picture of, and I can see it in her photography. I can go, oh wow, I got a sense of how she looks at the world, and yeah, to me that's artistry there.
Yeah. Do you spend? I guess let's do this then. I wonder how that's connected to the kind of research that you've been doing. So maybe we should just go back to your professional history, sort of like how you ended up getting involved with maps and where that all kind of started. And I want to come back to this artist topic.
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, of course, it all has to do with serotonin.
Of course. So, she is our honorary fourth member here.
And the neurotransmitter. So, both of those. Well, I've been interested.
Where did your interest start? Yeah, let's start there.
So way back, I was... I've been to graduate school twice, and the first time I was in chemistry. And by the time I was in chemistry grad school, I knew that I was only really interested in chemistry insofar as it related to human biochemistry. And then I thought, well, really what it's about is human brain chemistry. And how does that relate to those emotions we're feeling and the thoughts we're having? And that was before I'd ever encountered psychedelics. But my first year of graduate school, I first had my trip. It was an LSD trip at a Grateful Dead show, the first Grateful Dead show I was ever at. It was up in Laguna Seca. And
Of course.
Then about a month later, I had my first mushroom trip, and the most beautiful place I've ever been to, which is Havasu Falls, Arizona.
What was the dose?
I really don't know, but it was enough. Let me tell you. And those experiences really opened my eyes, and I couldn't. After those experiences, I couldn't stay in chemistry. I found it too limiting, but I also thought that I couldn't continue to do the animal research that I was doing. So I left graduate school, but I maintained my interest in altered states of consciousness and just studying consciousness in general.
Yeah. But so tell me about the trips, though. What was it about them? What did they open? What was the experience? Wow. What did it bring your awareness to?
I think that first one with the acid, it was remarkable for a couple of reasons. One was that I had this sense of, people talk about that sense of oneness. I didn't have that sort of dissolving of my ego. I didn't have that happen. But I had this sense of being part of this global community, and almost as if I was able to look down on the planet and go, "Oh wow, yeah, we're all in this together."
It wasn't. Were you visually seeing this, or was it like an understanding?
I was visually seeing that.
Okay.
Yeah, I had it was, and part of it involved having an image of this John Lennon album, "Imagine," in my head. So, and then there's this quote. I think it's Imagine the clouds crying. Dig a hole in your garden to put them in, something like that. Put the tears in, something along those lines. And that quote came to my mind, and I was picturing that image of John Lennon looking up at the clouds, and so that's when I got this sense of all of us being united in some sense of being in it all together. And I was, at that time, I was 23, and I think I was a very shy person, and I was very, kind of touch aversive. I like nowadays, I met you and I hugged you, and it's very typical for me now. But at that time, if somebody would have touched me on the shoulder, I would have kind of recoiled. And at that concert on the acid, I was meeting people, and it would seem totally natural for me to meet someone and immediately engage with them, immediately connect with them. And it was such a new experience for me. That made a huge impression on me. And I also had what I think was a paranormal experience that involved a German Shepherd.
Okay.
So, yeah.
This was during the acid trip?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're certain it was the German Shepherd and not the acid?
I was certain of it at the time, and when you tell the story of what happened, in later years, and even, I've told that story in classrooms. I've taught anthropology courses where I've talked about those kinds of experiences, and people will always question me like that.
Yeah. You've teased us.
Imagining, right?
Yeah.
You were just imagining us.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was certainly was my experience of it, was that this dog appeared when I was thinking of a dog that I had back in Pennsylvania where I grew up. And so the background of it was, I didn't realize I was tripping yet. I had ingested this acid that my friend and I had gotten 2 hits of acid for $1 a piece.
Wow.
Going into the concert. This guy wanted to get enough money for a ticket. And and my friend and I were like, okay, sure, why not, and it's worth the try, and we took this stuff, and I think Bruce Hornsby and the Range were on, and before the Dead came on. And
now, had you ever done anything before this?
No, I'd had marijuana a lot, but this was my first real psychedelic, my first tryptamine, psychedelic.
I mean, that's really ballsy. You're going into this crowded environment. Let me try this new thing I've never tried before. Fine, I'll take 2 hits. Right. So okay.
So we walk in there, and it just seemed like the right thing to do. Our first Grateful Dead concert, and about maybe half an hour to 45 minutes later, we're thinking, this stuff. We were sold, a couple pieces of paper. It didn't do anything. Anyway, it was kind of fun, to do that. And I left my friend, and I saw some people throwing frisbee in this big circle. And the Laguna Seca Raceway is a gigantic area where you can run around and throw frisbee, and it's a huge concert venue. And so I saw these people throwing frisbee, and I thought, I'm going to go throw with them. So I asked them if I could join in. They're like, sure, yeah. I'm throwing with them, and ordinarily, I mean, I used to play ultimate frisbee, and I'd throw them frisbee for almost my whole life, and I was enjoying it, but I kept throwing it, and it would go off to the side, and it wouldn't make it to where I was going. How do you know what? I'm going to let these people continue throwing frisbee. It's just not my day, and I kind of wandered off, not knowing that I was already tripping. And I thought, man, if only my dog Willie were here, because if I threw the frisbee to her, she wouldn't care if I didn't throw it right. She would run and catch it, or she would go and bring it back to me. And she was this German Shepherd and Saint Bernard mix, really wonderful dog. And as I'm thinking this dog walks up to me, frisbee in its mouth.
Wow.
And I was kind of dumbfounded. I mean, I thought, wow, there's this dog with a frisbee. I thought, I don't want to take it out of its mouth because, maybe it would, try to fight me for it, but I didn't have the courage, I think, at that time to really follow through with that. But I asked the people who were next to me. They were sitting next to me on this blanket. I said, "Is this your dog? Do you know whose dog this is?" Because I thought, if I knew whose dog it was, maybe I could play with this dog. I said, no, I know where this dog's from. Yeah. And the dog wandered off, and that was it for them. And I didn't see my friend Bob until the end of the concert. But it was a fantastic experience. And,
Yeah, so that's interesting. So where were you spiritually before this experience?
I was raised Lutheran, which doesn't tell you much about my spirituality, but at some point in my mid-teens, I was in a kind of depressive place, maybe around 9th grade, and somewhere around that time, I kind of toyed with the idea of going into the ministry in the Lutheran Church, because I didn't know what else I was going to do. I didn't see a whole lot of meaning in the go get a job and have a family and then die mill. I just didn't think that there was a whole lot there for me.
What a wonderful reason to get into teaching other people about spirituality. So, I have shit else to do, so I don't have that. Yeah, right. Yeah, so
fuck it. I thought about it, and I liked the pastors at the church, but by the time I graduated from college, I knew I didn't want to have anything to do with Christianity anymore. So I really didn't have a place, in terms of spirituality, and I didn't have a really well thought out, not that I have a really well thought out belief system now, but at the time I just was kind of free floating.
Yeah. And now, so did that experience sort of open you up to another level of spirituality, or did it make your scientific mind more?
It was more the scientific part, but it also really kind of kickstarted something else, because I kept having these sort of synchronous experiences, these experiences of synchronicities happening. And I was a graduate student in chemistry, and I would notice these things, and I would think,
like, you think of somebody and they call.
Well, that kind of thing, and I remember one time I was in the bookshelves. This was, so I was in my first year graduate school in chemistry at Caltech, and I was in the bookshelves, and the library there, as you can imagine, is like 99% science and engineering books. But I was in the literature section and the kind of fiction section, and I was just kind of pawing through the books and going, what's interesting here? And I saw this book called The Search for the Girl with the Blue Eyes, and I picked it up and I thought, this is interesting. It's about it was about ESP, I think, or not remote viewing, but it was about these sort of paranormal phenomena. I started reading this, and one of the books nearby it was Journeys Out of the Body by Robert Monroe, and I started reading about that and tried to practice it and didn't get very far with it, but I was really intrigued with it from the scientific perspective, because if these things were really happening, then they didn't agree with what I had learned about science.
Yeah. So the mushroom trip, how was that different?
I think that one, I tripped with somebody who I was in the process of falling in love with, and that just really, that was the main thing about that whole trip, I think, was that I was with her and realizing how I approached my relationships with people, and it was just a lot of fun too. It was just a lot of fun, and we were in this incredibly beautiful environment. I don't think that really had any direct impact on my thoughts, my spirituality or my thoughts about those states of consciousness, because I was really just wrapped up in. There's this woman that I'm falling in love with, and she's married.
Well then, that would be in any other community that might be a thing that would hold you back.
right, yeah.
So where are you with spirituality now? Like where do you fall on that scale? Does it work with science? Is it something else?
It's something else. Although I gotta say that I've had for a long time, I've had this idea, this fantasy that somebody, that people who are philosophers and scientists will find ways to bridge spiritual and scientific understandings. And you say that to somebody who's very much in the scientific world, and that's it's impossible. It's impossible. Think about the scientific method, and it's not adequate. It's not built for studying certain things like what we think of as paranormal experiences. They're very hard to study scientifically.
Yeah.
So.
Well, they're difficult, but I mean, does that make it impossible? I mean, just so you know, full disclosure, like where I'm leaning on it, I'm at a place in my life where I feel that they're very much dancing together. And it feels like right now we're in kind of an interesting time in human history, because there are more and more people that are feeling like one is not negating the other. You don't have to either be of scientific mind or spiritual mind. Like you can have spiritual experiences, and then perhaps someday we'll be able to study that spiritual experience. Yeah.
That's I think that pretty well encapsulates where I am with things as well. And I haven't ever seen a real contradiction between scientific thinking and spirituality. I think it's no longer the case. I think back, 50, 60 years ago, probably if you're a scientist and you're religious or have spiritual beliefs, then you really have to keep those very well separated and not have those two things enter into each other's worlds.
Yeah.
But now it's not so much that way, I think.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite quotes that I constantly reference. It's the test of a first-rate intelligence is one that is able to keep two opposing thoughts in mind at the same time, yet still retain the ability to function. It's F. Scott Fitzgerald.
Oh, that's a quote.
So I feel like it's kind of an interesting. This is why these particular subjects I think are so fascinating for people in our community, because we do have all these giant minds that are also having these very spiritual experiences, and people do still want to dissect them. People still want to know where they come from, but it doesn't negate the importance of it. So even for example, with your psychic German Shepherd experience, yes, you were high. Yes, it also does not negate the fact that it was a psychic experience.
And I'm fully there with you. And so, the tough thing is really, it's tough to, I think, be able to explain those things scientifically. You take the scientific method or scientific approaches and discuss those things in a way that is in the language of the scientists, and that where they will listen to you and say, okay, maybe you've got a point there. They might disagree with you, but at least you can have a discussion.
Well, I think ultimately, really, what we're all doing is we're trying to figure it out. It's being life, God, what's the purpose? Why are we here? I mean, it's spirituality and science or art. They're really asking the same questions. They're just using different tools. So, I mean, I wonder sort of so you're going on this process. You've had your shroom trip. That's also done the thing. And is this before or during your second master's degree that you're going for?
That was really the first time I was in graduate school. So I ended up getting what's called a terminal master's degree there. I was going for the PhD and quit that program in my second year. Okay. So
you said you had a conflict about working on animals or with animals?
Okay. Yeah, and I had that conflict before I even started graduate school, but it really became something that I couldn't continue to live with as I was working in the lab, and killing rats and dissecting their brains. At that point, it became so real for me. And, one night I was in the lab and I was doing what they call a P32 kinase prep. So I was working with radioactive material, and I was in the lab by myself, and I was thinking, I'm irradiating myself, and I'm doing work that I don't really like, with the idea that someday I'm going to get a PhD and I can work in the field of neuroscience and make a difference, and somehow make a difference. And I'm like, I want to make a difference right now. I want to make a difference in my own life, and I want to be doing something I love doing. So ultimately, I think about 2 months later, I told my advisor I was leaving, but I needed to pass my qualifying exam first, so I'd have something to go on, from having been there for 2 years.
At this point, how many psychedelic trips do you think you've had? Ballpark.
I would say about 100.
Okay.
Yeah.
Woo. All right. You went all the way down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did that affect your feeling on this, do you think? With animals specifically?
Yes, it did. Yeah. But I think it... Yeah. And what I could see from psychedelics was that they had the capacity to completely and permanently change someone's perspective. And one of the things that changed for me was my sense of responsibility for the planet. And this was in the mid to late 80s, and I already was thinking, do I really want to do animal research? And I really started seeing that as connected. The scientific search for knowledge, and the just like taking down trees and taking down whatever that was in the pathway in order to find that scientific knowledge. I saw that as being very closely related to the things we were doing to the planet as a whole. And so, I even at that point, I think I saw psychedelics as possibly being a tool that would allow human beings to start to rethink their relationship to other beings, other people, and that might eventually get us to turn the corner.
Yeah.
Yes.
So. Do you think that your perception that psychedelics were a key to human evolution in that regard? Yeah. Do you think that you felt like that at the time that was biological, psychological, anthropological? Do you feel like you had a basis for that?
Wow. No, I don't think I really thought it out very much at the time. I knew I wanted to study those things, and but
could we have gotten to where we are with science without the animal studies?
No, and there are certain things that we've been able to do with animal studies that we couldn't have done very easily any other way.
So this is very much just like it was a personal choice. It's like you couldn't do it anymore, but you weren't thinking we need to stop this from happening because we still need it.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking everyone should stop doing animal research and all animal research. I think there's some animal research that should be stopped, and a lot of it has been stopped. There are certain things that I think, certain things that are done in animal studies that are just, they can be done other ways, or they're just not that important.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
So at this point, you'd had over 100 trips.
Yeah.
Various substances?
Wide variety.
Wide variety,
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're out there, you've got the connections.
It's a Renaissance man.
Yes. Going down all the holes.
Renaissance psycho.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you're experiencing these things from a scientific standpoint, but at this time, are you like officially studying them, or are they just sort of like personal experiences?
I'm officially studying psychedelic experiences, not my own scientifically, but I am, with the research on ibogaine, I'm studying those scientifically.
This was going on at that time? Were you?
Oh, no. That's only, I started working.
We're still in the history part.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I started working with ibogaine back in 2009.
Let's fast forward.
Yeah, so the ibogaine work started in 2009.
Okay.
And, back in in my mid-20s and the late 80s, I was thinking, I would really love to work with this stuff, but I had no idea how to get there, from point A to B. Or point A to Z, for that matter.
So I guess let's get to, let's say ibogaine is what, point F. Let's get to point B. How did you end up in a position where the path is opening for you to be able to professionally and scientifically study psychedelics? What was sort of the big break?
Well, I think my decision to ultimately go into graduate school in anthropology was a big part of that. And in anthropology, I did my master's thesis on cross-cultural study of shamanic states of consciousness, and did my PhD on religious conversion. So I was studying altered states as far as I was concerned my entire time in graduate school in anthropology.
Am I a horrible nerd that I want to read both those papers?
Yes.
Yes.
And you would not want to, you'd get into them and you're like, oh, yeah.
Do you still have them?
They're in the library at UCSD.
Okay,
yeah.
make you read
I
them.
know where to get people's research doctorates.
So,
I don't. What's a library? I kid, of course.
Yeah. So what was the question?
Well, we're going down sort of how you ended up getting into professionally researching. So you have the papers that's on the shamanic states.
And then anthropology. And then, but once I finished the degree, which was a painful process, sorry. Once I finished, I thought, okay, where do I go from here? I didn't know how I was going to be doing work that I really wanted to do. I had the option of really trying to get a job as an anthropology professor where I'd be teaching, sort of standard anthropology, Anthro 101, religious anthropology of religion, topics that interested me, but not enough to be like, that's what I want to do my whole life. I want to teach people anthropology. Yeah. So I really just drifted for a while doing pickup teaching, worked for Google for a while from home, and then got the job at UCSD, which I didn't know it at the time, but it was actually an important part of being able to work on the psychedelics, because it's a job that's pretty much a 9-to-5 sort of job. It's seasonal in terms of how busy it is. Like right now, it's a busy time for me in the job. But in 2005, I started this job, and it took me a few years to get to a comfort level where I could say, okay, now I can kind of, I can do this stuff and I can also do other things. And I was looking for that thing that I would find fulfilling. And I didn't even dare. I wasn't even thinking, I want to do psychedelics research. I didn't know if it was really possible, but I met Randy Henkin, who he was a San Diego burner, and now he's up in the Bay Area. But he was working with MAPS, and actually it turns out that ibogaine was the thing that got him into MAPS, because I think he was treated with ibogaine way back when. And I learned that he was working with MAPS, and I thought, well, maybe there's a way I could do that. But ultimately the breakthrough for me came from my friend serotonin. So it all comes back to serotonin. As I promised. Yeah. And I was on MDMA. We were driving up to Burning Man in 2009.
Yeah.
And I wasn't
Rolling
driving.
balls
I was
on
a
the
passenger.
drive. Right.
Yeah, I was a passenger. Yeah. Serotonin's driving. She's totally sober, but she's got this keen empathy where she's able to go, okay, I can kind of sense where you are with things, and having a conversation on the way up. And I let on that I had some LSD with me, and a short while later, and she's driving along, she's running the tunes on her iPad, and she's driving, and we're having this conversation and having a great time. And at some point she looks at me and she has this she's just figured something out. She looks at me and she goes, "Do you want to meet Rick Doblin?" And I thought, okay. I knew Rick Doblin was the head of MAPS, and I said, I want to meet him. And she said, okay, here's what's going to happen. Tuesday night, you're going to go to a teepee with me. That's where we're going to meet Rick Doblin, and you're going to give him some LSD that he's going to use in a guided ceremony. And that's how I met Rick Doblin. But here's what was so amazing about that, from my perspective, that serotonin, she, I think, put the whole thing together. She was like, he's going to meet Rick Doblin. there's going to be an opening for someone to be doing ibogaine research, because she was working with an ibogaine clinic in Baja California and could see this coming down the pike. And she's like, Kingsley's going to do this. And so that's why she introduced me to Rick Doblin. The next time I saw him was the following April.
Was he, I'm sorry, the guided LSD ceremony? That's
Yes.
a thing that he was doing in a teepee
At
with
Burning
other
Man.
people?
Yeah.
So he's like leading other people
He
through
was helping
a thing?
to guide someone through an LSD experience.
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically just people were gifting him some LSD in order to get that thing to happen.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So you go in there, you give him the LSD, you guys have a conversation?
Yeah.
I assume.
And then, and then the next time I saw him was at the MAPS conference in April of 2010. And he and I were both wearing suits and ties. My tie was an anarchy tie, by the way, that Serotonin gave me.
Of course.
Of course.
I was going to name this episode Serotonin.
Yes, Serotonin. Yes, yeah. So, and that was the meeting for talking about the research project for studying outcomes for people taking ibogaine for substance dependence.
Okay.
So yeah, that was that was points, I think.
This is
probably E and F.
of how to put together everything you want to do in your career. By the way,
Yeah.
So-
my jealousy is at level 27 right now.
Well, you're getting the roadmap.
I'm making notes right now.
The first step is
Burning
take
Man.
lots of acid. Yeah. Acid.
Take acid to Burning Man.
MDMA. Yes, take acid.
Weird.
Thanks, Miss Rance.
Yeah. Nobody does that.
Nobody does that anymore.
So what was your experience with ibogaine prior to this?
Prior to that, pretty much nil. And
were you familiar with it?
Yeah, before 2009, if someone would have asked me about ibogaine, I would have said, "What are you talking about?"
Yeah.
I didn't know what it was. And
So how did it get introduced to you? What was the first thing you were told about it?
Well, my friend was working with this clinic. She was working as a
Serotonin.
kind of intake counselor for people going to get addiction treatment at this clinic in Playa de Tijuana.
And this is in Tijuana?
Yeah.
Okay. And so tell us about the clinic. Is it still around?
The clinic is not there anymore, but it's moved to a little town called San Pancho, which is not too far from Puerto Vallarta, as far as I can discern.
So it's like, how do people find out? Are they just known as a substance abuse clinic and this is something they offer? Or is it known that this is where you go to do ibogaine?
It's known that this is a place where you can have ibogaine, and specifically their main thing is treating people for drug addiction.
Okay.
And most people who go there for opiate addiction, heroin, OxyContin, things like that. So
Where does ibogaine come from?
it's derived from a couple of plant sources, but initially it was derived from a plant, a West African shrub called iboga, iboga, iboga. And that plant, the root bark is used as a sacrament in ceremonies in Gabon and Cameroon. So, ibogaine was a really kind of minor player in the psychedelic 60s. And, you might hear, I've only heard from one person ever who has said, "Oh yeah, I had ibogaine, as a kind of, a psychedelic that they were trying out."
Yeah.
And this was, do you know who Mountain Girl is?
I don't.
She used to date Jerry Garcia.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah.
I know Jerry.
Yeah. So yeah, of course you know Jerry. Yeah, we're all Jerry's friends.
Oh.
And she was giving a talk at MAPS and was talking about how when she was a lab tech at Stanford, she had some ibogaine and she did the ibogaine in the lab one night, and that's why she got fired. But she's the only person I've ever heard say, "Oh yeah, I had ibogaine with me and I just did some."
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's these clinics that exist. So the clinic in Playa de Tijuana, at the time there were probably 20 clinics around the world. Now there are probably 40 or 50.
Wow. And so ibogaine is not something that people very commonly do, for lack of a better description, recreationally.
That's correct. Yeah, and actually, I've yet to do a full-on trippy dose. I've had small doses, but
What do the small doses do?
small doses are kind of mildly euphoric and introspective. But interestingly enough, I think that they have made me aversive to addictive substances, even beer, which is my number one favorite one, just ahead of coffee. And I was really surprised to find that was the case. But so the mild dose didn't do a whole lot, but it was kind of a happy experience. And I did notice that I was repulsed by cigarette smoke, and I didn't crave a beer like I usually do. I got home at the end of the long day. I'd gone and interviewed 2 people at this clinic in Tijuana, and then came back home, and I went to the fridge to open the fridge up and have a beer, and it was kind of this automatic thing, and I thought, I don't even want a beer. What am I doing? So I thought, I'm not going to have one.
Yeah.
And so, out of character,
How does it, what about sugar?
Sugar.
Do anything with
Can't
that?
say. Personally, I haven't had any experiences where it's, changed my sense
Megan
of that.
Arash doing
Yeah.
all the ibogaine.
Yeah. No, I'll tell
We're
you.
going to quit smoking and
If
get
there's
off the carbs.
exactly,
Yeah.
if there's a thing that will get me to stop fucking eating chocolate and smoking cigarettes, like done.
Right, I'm on it.
Oh, yeah.
Question about the clinic, specifically the one that was in Tijuana and is now by
Yeah.
I know that in Gabon and in Cameroon and in a lot of the West African countries where ibogaine is part of a kind of ritualistic culture, shamanistic culture, they're very adamant. The Cameroonians are very adamant that it's only used in this religious structure, in this spiritual structure.
Yeah.
When it's being utilized in a clinical situation, I'm going to imagine they don't have a Cameroonian shaman standing there shaking a gourd. Excuse me, that was really racially insensitive.
In a lab coat.
Going through the entire process of a shamanistic ritual.
Yeah. For
With
that,
someone who's come in and paid however much money to be cured of heroin addiction.
It's typically what they would call a medical model, where you go to this clinic and you're administered the medicine, whether it's the ibogaine powder, which is ibogaine hydrochloride, or it's the root bark powder from the plant. It's usually not done ceremonially in that way. Although there's the one really notable exception is there's this guy named Dimitri Eugianis, who's originally from New York, who was treated with ibogaine way back, I think back in the 80s, and it got him past some pretty severe addictions. I think heroin was his main one, and now he is a psychedelic shaman. He goes around and he gives treatments to people with iboga, and he does it very ceremonially. He has been initiated into the Bwiti religion. So
Wow. So what in the clinic? Well, let's just go through the clinic then. What happens? Let's say I am a heroin addict and I arrive. I don't know. I'm scratching myself aloud.
You have your checkbook. That's the first question.
Okay.
Do you have your checkbook?
I have my checkbook.
You have to give up all your drugs.
Okay.
You have to give up all your drugs, and they go into a locked cabinet somewhere on the premises, and theoretically someplace where you can't get to them.
Okay.
And then you're stabilized. Typically, at most places, you're not going to be getting the ibogaine treatment right away. They want to put you on some kind of opiate with a shorter half-life than a lot of them. Some of the worst ones you might know are actually the ones that are used for treating people for addiction. So methadone and Suboxone. Methadone has a really long half-life, so it's flushed from your system pretty slowly.
What does half-life mean? I'm sorry.
It's the amount of time. It's the amount of time it takes for half the chemical to be flushed from your system. So it's turned into metabolites at a certain rate, and so the amount of time it takes for half of that to happen.
Okay.
And so things like morphine, I think, has a half-life of 4 hours, whereas methadone is more on the order of 12 or 15, something like that. Mm-hmm. So they want to get you on something short-acting, and then when you're coming out of withdrawal at some point, they're going to when you're starting to withdraw from that short-acting opiate is when they're going to get you with the first dose of ibogaine.
Okay, so are you in a hospital room? Is it like a specially designed room to be comfortable? What does it look like?
It's like being in the birthing room, because it's made to be the most comfortable thing, but it's got the safety, not quite of a hospital room, but ideally you've got somebody who has medical training. You've got an MD, you've at least got an EMT, and a nurse there in case anything goes wrong. But it's really more like you're in somebody's really cozy resort home, and and that's where you get your treatment.
Burner Podcast.
As individuals, each and every one of us must remember that we reinforce the zeitgeist of our time. Through our actions, through our words, through our dress, through our thoughts, and now even through our Facebook profile photos. We are all being the change we want to see in the world, and it is making a difference. The momentum of this shift is gradual, as it takes one person at a time to build, but it is accelerating. That's an excerpt of Through Our Facebook Profile Pictures, the June 30th entry into the Burner Podcast blog, written by the amazing Tanasi. The San Francisco Decompression, it looks like it's scheduled for October 11th at 12 p.m. That's Indiana Street in the Dogpatch neighborhood of San Francisco. More information on that over at burningman.org. Utopia, the San Diego Regional Burn, 2015. The theme is Robots and Dinosaurs Unite. That's on October 15th through the 18th. I may be biased, but I'm told by many that it is the most amazing regional burn in the world. Wow, I so knew that I was being biased that I actually stuttered over my own words on there. More information on that at sdutopia.com. That's S as in Sam, D as in Diego. Utopia is spelled YOUTOPIA.com. Go find the regionals in your region. Go get involved with your region. Go build some art. Go to your weekly bar meetups. Go meet some nerdy comic book fans that happen to be burners. Go to regionals.burningman.org to find out what the closest regional to you is. If you live in the Sudan or in Kazakhstan, it looks like there isn't an official region for you just yet. But in a lot of North America, there's a couple of stops. There's one in Brazil. There's one in Argentina. It looks like a lot throughout Europe and South Africa, Australia, Greenland. Come on, guys. Get your act together. Get a regional together. So yeah, that's at regionals.burningman.org. Go find what the closest region is to you and go get involved with your community. Make some new friends. Go do some amazing shit. Help us continue to spread this ridiculous thing, this little thing of ours in the desert. Either way, let's get back to our interview with Kingsley.
Welcome home.
So, as you're coming down off of the methadone, or you're halfway through, that's when they administer first dose.
Yeah, it would be off for probably morphine or something really short acting. So yeah, that's when they administer the first dose when you're starting to come into withdrawal. And the withdrawal symptoms, within, I think it's around an hour or two, within an hour or so, that you're not feeling the withdrawal symptoms anymore. The ibogaine starts to have its psychedelic, its effects on the brain and the mind, which they're really described as being very dreamlike. So instead of, people say it's onerophrenic, so it's dream producing. Rather than a psychedelic. So yeah, it's more like having a waking dream than anything else.
It's a bit closer to ayahuasca?
No.
I was expecting us to reference DMT and ayahuasca a lot during this conversation, because I feel like that's the thing that people are more familiar with.
Yeah.
Myself included.
Well, see, ayahuasca is something I do have experience with, and also DMT, but I haven't had the full-on ibogaine or iboga experience, so I can't really compare them directly. But there are some similarities, I think. But it's.
Where is it acting in the brain in general, chemically?
I couldn't really say. I'm not really up on the literature on that. But there have been a lot of studies on what receptors it's hitting, and its affinity for different receptors. And it's not acting primarily on the opiate receptors. It's got a lot of activity at different receptor sites. But as far as the geography of the brain, or where it's happening locally, I'm not really sure.
Okay. So you're starting to get the hallucinogen effects, and it feels like a waking dream. What kinds of stuff do people report seeing in this situation? What's happening?
When they're taking it for treating addiction, a lot of times what they're seeing are images from the past, and I've described this as being like a a sort of Scrooge experience where you see like the ghosts of Christmas past, and you have to deal with these things that are really not things you want to deal with. But like, the time you screwed over your brother and, stole his girlfriend, or you lied to your parents, and, just things that you really regret doing, and that seem to be tied in with your addiction. And sometimes people will have visions of what could happen to them in the future. One guy reported that he was seeing himself in the future. He and his brother became major drug runners, and they had bought a yacht, and they were running drugs into Miami from the Caribbean, and they were really high stakes players. And he, in that scenario, I think he slept with his brother's girlfriend and then killed his brother, and he was seeing this as his possible future if he kept going down the road he was on. He was like, okay,
wow,
I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah. Okay. Is that the first dose?
It really depends. I think for him, let's see, where was he doing his treatment? I think that was the first dose. A lot of times at the clinics, they'll give you what's called a flood dose. They'll give you a starter dose to make sure you're not going to have an adverse reaction. And then if that's okay, then they'll give you a bigger dose. And sometimes they'll kind of stage it. Like they'll give you 450 milligrams, and then 3 hours later, they'll add another dose like that on, and, make it accumulative. It stays in the body for a long time.
Okay.
It has a long
So first, what would be a potential adverse reaction? Have there been some?
Yes. Well, the adverse reactions can be both physical and psychological. Physically, it's dangerous if you have a heart condition. The ibogaine or iboga will slow down your heart rate, and sometimes people will go into cardiac arrest. So they try to screen for people having heart problems. They'll do EKGs and other tests before it happens. On rare occasions, someone dies from using the ibogaine for drug treatment, for treating drug addiction, I should say. On the psychological end, these are people, and they're going in there for drug treatment. They're desperate. They're at the end of their rope. They go in there, and I've interviewed people before their treatments, after their treatments, and they go into the treatment thinking, if this doesn't work, I'm going to kill myself, or either I'm going to stop taking the drugs, or they're going to kill me. And so they're in a place where, they're pretty familiar with the idea of dying, and they go into this state. In the traditional usage, people will go into the land of the dead. This is what iboga is for. And so, and when they're taking this for treating drug addiction, sometimes they'll think they have the opportunity to pass through to the other side and not come back. And a lot of the treatment providers will have a contract. They'll have the person sign a contract saying, if you have the chance to die, if you think you want to die, you have to promise me right now you're going to come back. You're not going to go down that path. So
and they can remember that.
I guess so.
It does something. They're planting a seed in there. They're inceptioning them.
Remember things that you cannot possibly imagine that you can remember. And we're trained culturally to accept contracts that we negotiate with one another as something that is vital and important. And so it's in your head, even if you're high as fuck.
That's a good point.
You know in your head that you made that commitment.
Interesting.
So that actually is a perfect psychological tool to
That's a good point.
Respect they're not going to jump off the cliff because they promised somebody they weren't going to.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I think that's quite valid. Yeah, and my friend Serotonin, bringing it back to her, she is somebody who can actually see somebody doing that. She can sense that somebody's going, oh, that person's about to cross over, and she will say, don't go there. Don't. So
it is. This is an example of the brain being so powerful that you could, in your mind, decide that you're going to go through to the other side and end life, and your body will expire. Yeah. That is amazing. Yeah. So is it true that if you die in a dream, you actually die?
It can be.
Good question.
It depends on if your body reacts in accordance with what goes on in your brain.
Wow.
It happens.
I defer.
That is,
It happens. I mean, there's nobody there to ask, like, did you dream you were dying before you did that? But
because we always wake up before it happens.
there are people who have been, like, on EEG monitors, things like that, and you could tell that they were in rapid eye movement during sleep when they expired.
Wow.
You could see changing levels of physical excitement, and then they keel over and die.
Wow.
So, I mean, there are tests that say, yeah, you can die in a dream.
Wow.
We don't actually know from having a conversation with that person because now they're dead.
Yeah.
So, did you dream you were dying and then you died? That's not okay.
God, that is
that conversation.
mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Okay, so...
The mind is a fucked up place.
Don't
Trust me.
Don't go there
Promise.
alone.
You promise you sign a contract that says you're not going to cross. Some people do, because some people don't keep, they're addicts, so I guess they don't hold up all their contracts. So it's a part of the personality type.
Nor do any of us.
So how long is this whole process lasting? From the minute that you walk into the clinic and you give up all your drugs to however many doses they give you and you go on this journey?
That really depends on what clinic you're at. The first clinic I worked with, Claire would have people at her clinic for at least a couple of days, sometimes a week or two before the treatment. And she would start them on a different nutritional regimen. They'd be getting massages. They'd be, I think she might have had some kind of psychological therapy as well, but I'm not sure. A lot of people, though, do it much more like, it's very regimented where, people come in on Monday, they get their treatment on Wednesday, and then they leave on Sunday.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it can be like that. And the second clinic I worked with, because I worked with two clinics on the study that I did, sometimes people they'd cross over the border. I'd get a call from the clinic director. He'd say, hey, we've got some people who you might want to interview for your study, and I'm gonna dose them pretty soon, so it's now or never. So they'd get there, and then 4 hours later they'd be getting ibogaine. It's just astonishing to me.
How many clients do they have on average per week?
I can tell you pretty closely because, let's see, over the 2 years that I did recruitment for the study, when I was enrolling people into the study, there were 67 people at the clinic. So run that down with, I guess, once every other week. Somebody on average.
So I know that Meg had asked earlier about which part of the brain it's working on, and you said that you guys are still kind of figuring that out, or the literature we're still out to lunch on that one.
Well, I'm not really up on the literature, so I don't want to venture a guess on that one.
So what is it that you're studying exactly with ibogaine?
I'm studying the outcomes for the treatment, which is we're referring to it as ibogaine assisted treatment because there are other parts of the treatment as well, but it's really ibogaine is the central thing, or iboga root bark, as the case may be. So I enrolled people into the study. I did some baseline measures of addiction severity, depression, and a few other scales. And then after the treatment, do some follow-up measures. Some of them are right after treatment. So there's something called the subjective opioid withdrawal scale. So just as I was saying, like before their treatment, they're starting to go into withdrawal. Then we give them the subjective opioid withdrawal scale, and they answer questions about, I feel like vomiting. What's the intensity of that feeling? I'm perspiring, so you get a sense of the intensity of their withdrawal symptoms. And then 3 days after their treatment, give them the same questionnaire. And they haven't had any opiates, since then, since before treatment. And if they hadn't had ibogaine, they'd be in seriously bad shape. But what we're finding is that their withdrawal symptoms are reduced very substantially. Uh-huh. So their scores on that withdrawal scale to go down. The p-value, if you are into statistics, is less than 0.01 on the change from before and after. Mm-hmm. And I can guarantee you that if you did the same study without giving them something to do something with their withdrawal symptoms, they'd be much worse than the second time around. They'd be in agony 3 days after.
There's very much a physical change that's happening in their body as compared to if they were just going through withdrawal without the ibogaine treatment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can say, I'm a big believer in the psychological effects, the psychospiritual effects, but you give somebody that ibogaine and their withdrawal symptoms fall that rapidly and that dramatically, there's got to be something very biochemically, there's something biochemical going on there.
Yeah.
But then the main part of the study was to follow people long term. So every month for a year, I would attempt to get hold of them, and people that they had to designate a significant other, who I would also contact and ask them about their drug use, and I would go through another series of tests, so measures, and get that month's measurement from them. And so for a whole year, do that, and then compare the baseline scores with the after scores.
And where is it at right now as far as success rate?
Oh, the study is complete. In fact, it's been complete for quite a while. And the hardest part of the study was that a lot of people dropped out of the study, and they were difficult to reach. So they would go to the clinic, get their treatment, and they'd go back home. And these are all people who lived in the States, and so they were scattered around. A lot of them in California, some in New England, New York, Colorado. And from month to month, as you might imagine, it was pretty difficult to get hold of people. So there was a lot of missing data points.
Were they just dropping out of just boredom?
Sometimes
studies have a certain percentage. It's kind of consistent across most studies. A percentage of people just disappear and are unavailable for follow-up.
Yeah, and
really affects.
And I saw the drop off pretty much right away with some people. Some people didn't even complete one follow-up. I have to move on to the dark beer at this point. So, but some people weren't even around for the first follow-up, and so I attribute that to they probably had a relapse, and they were very disappointed. They thought, okay, this stuff didn't work. Some of those people, though, that I couldn't get hold of in the first month or two, I actually was able to reach after that. And some people had a rough time in the first month or two, and then they bounced back and they became clean after that. But we only had 12 people who, quote unquote, finished the study. They did the final follow-up visit.
Out of how many?
Out of 30.
Okay.
So, low rate of people finishing the study. And those are the people that we really have to rely on for our data comparisons. And we don't have a control group. So it's not the most scientifically rigorous. It's the best we could do, basically, because we're looking at observations from actual clinical interventions. So, but looking at those people, we can see that their drug use severity has dropped enormously from before treatment to after treatment. And for most people, you're talking about one treatment that lasts for a couple of days, and then they go home and their lives are changed. But we're also showing that they're improving in other areas. So their depression scores drop at month one. Their depression scores are lower at first month after treatment, and they're also lower at 12 months after treatment. And there's something that's part of this measure called the Addiction Severity Index that looks at social and family well-being. It's sort of how well you're getting along with people that matter to you in your life. People you work with, your family members, people you live with. And we're also showing that after the treatment, they have significant improvements in their relationships with people in their lives. It makes a lot of sense.
I mean,
I was going to ask that because traditional ibogaine ceremonies in West African countries are not just utilized for addiction issues. They're actually more primarily utilized for mental health issues, depression, bipolar disorder, anxiety issues, things like that, because of the way it readjusts your dopamine receptors and uptake and all the rest of it. And so, because my area of focus is on the underlying mental health basis for a lot of addiction issues.
Oh, wow.
That's why I'm really super interested.
Oh,
in
wow.
what you do.
I see why.
This all comes together. So I was wondering if you were taking in any factors on mental health in your own study.
So there's the back depression inventory is the main one we're using for that. And then the Addiction Severity Index also has a it's a psychiatric severity subscale.
Yeah.
We're not quite we're showing improvements, but not significant. And I think that has to do with the small number of people who finished the study. I think if we had 30 people who we had 12-month data on, we'd show significant changes there as well.
I would imagine that you have a not insignificant amount of naysayers out there who are, for one thing, I imagine, using the fact that you had such a small study as an excuse to poke holes at it.
Oh, yeah. That's for sure. It's a right.
Welcome to it. That's how that works.
Well, and then it's a legitimate concern for sure. And thankfully, we also have a second small study that was done in New Zealand, which was pretty much mirroring the same methods. And
how many finished that one?
14, I think, 13 or 14. But they actually started with they almost everyone who started the study there finished. They had a very different situation there. For one thing, it's ibogaine is legal to prescribe there. And
I was going to ask, what is the schedule for ibogaine in the U.S.?
It's Schedule 1.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Shocking.
So,
Shocking. Everything good is Schedule 1.
It has no medicinal value. Go
like
figure.
Everything else that I'd like to say.
And it's a drug of abuse. That's the biggest irony for
that's
ibogaine.
hilarious.
It's
like what
considered
the
a drug
hell?
of it's abuse substance. Yeah, right.
I'm
going to go out and just shoot a line.
Yeah.
I'm going to do some lines of ibogaine right now.
I'm going to be
Let's
that
just
girl in the YouTube video.
Go
with the 8-foot
rage.
line on the bar. Baby.
Oh man.
So what? Was the study small due to budgetary constraints, or why wouldn't it be bigger?
Yes, and budgetary constraints, I guess, would be the primary thing. I was the only person working on the study, and this
is what MAPS does. Is basically they're coordinating and funding it.
Yes,
so that you can do the study.
Yes.
Okay.
And and I was the only person working on the study. And that was on top of my full-time job at UCSD. And, it was a handful, even just to do the 30 people in the study, and trying to reach them monthly. It was a lot to try to keep up with.
Yeah.
And but if the budget would have been such that I could have had, 2 or 3 other people working with me, then we probably could have enrolled, 2 or 3 times the number of people into the study.
Also, it might not hurt that ibogaine treatment is not that cheap.
Yeah.
According to the 4 sites I just pulled up that were for the first 4 that I pulled up on Google, it's kind of expensive. So your average heroin user may not have the budget for it.
How much is it?
The cheapest thing I've found so far is $5,000 for 3 days.
Yeah, that's a good deal. Yeah.
Here's one that's 10.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
It's not cheap.
Yeah.
So part of the budget that MAPS would need to do like a bigger study would be to actually be able to pay for some of these people to go through the treatment.
Well, not in this case, since what we were doing, and this is a way of doing the study relatively cheaply, but it's not a controlled clinical trial. But we're observing people who are going for treatment anyway, so they're actually paying for the treatment. We're only paying to do the study. So,
well, I mean, I feel like that also, to some extent, would affect the kinds of results that you can get, because there is a certain socioeconomic class that's able to access it.
That's an excellent point. Yeah, and also these are people who are, they're paying, or their families are paying for them to go get this treatment, so they have the motivation, going in. So the fact that we don't have a comparison group or a control group, not good.
Yeah.
But
how do you? And this is because this is a question that I always think about when I'm, constructing these hypothetical studies that somebody someday is going to give me money to do. Do you feel like it's ethical? Like if you're setting up a study and and you're ready, you have the money, you can hand out the ibogaine, you've gotten some kind of permit from somewhere, God has smiled upon your project, whatever it looks like. Do you feel like it's ethical not to give it to somebody just for a control group? It bothers me.
I'm not sure I'm getting your question.
So
if somebody gave me a whole bunch of money and a whole bunch of ibogaine to do a treatment study to in conjunction with an anthropologist who was looking at the results in terms of this, and I was looking at the psychological results, and we were doing all this wonderful work together, I would feel really hard-pressed to set up a control group of heroin addicts
Yeah.
who met all the qualifications, and I'm
Oh,
not
yeah.
going to give them this.
Right,
I'm
right.
not going to give
Yeah,
it to you.
that's
That bothers me.
to be able. Yeah, and how do you do a control? How do you do a control with
And
a
so-
population that's seeking treatment for addiction? That's
Yeah, like that bothers
probably
me.
the biggest obstacle for doing such a study. So we'd have to be, if we're going to do a clinical trial down the road, we can't be just using a placebo. Even though people might say, "Oh, it's probably placebo effect." You're getting, tell that to the heroin addict who needs something to cut their addiction, their withdrawal symptoms.
I don't want anybody going in thinking they're getting placebo in that kind of situation, because it's like addiction treatment, especially if it's in conjunction with a mental health disorder that is just complicating the entire process. Where is the ethical platform that allows you to be like, I'm going to treat you, but not you, and you, but not you, and you, but not you?
Yeah, I think you might have been able to get away with that back in the 50s, but,
So what does that mean? Where does it stand now?
Well, you wouldn't be allowed, you wouldn't get an experiment past the review board if you said, yeah, we're going to have 24 people not get any treatment. We're going to give them placebo. They're coming in hoping for some kind of treatment.
But so is that not an imperative part of the study? To have a control group?
Down the road, So, FDA approval for drugs is going to require that kind of clinical, double-blind clinical trial. And so how do you meet that standard? And this is a problem for a lot of psychedelic studies, actually, but it's particularly troublesome with an addiction study. So, how do you do that? You'd have to have some treatment to compare it to, probably, is my guess. So
we'd have to have some other approximation of equivalent treatment outcomes.
Yeah,
the thing is, there isn't one.
Yeah, maybe the placebo would be methadone. Maybe you'd be comparing it to what happens if you just give them methadone, and then So
do we have any information on exactly at what point it did get Schedule 1 status? I mean, at what point did it cross their desk? How did they even find out about this fucking super random?
I would love to know, because I think there were a few hundred things placed on Schedule 1 status back in the late 60s. 1970, I think, it was under Nixon. Controlled Substances Act, and ibogaine in 1970 was placed on that list along with LSD and psilocybin. How'd they even know about it? That's a damn good question.
That's amazing to me. I mean, I've definitely had experience with government, and it's amazing how completely out of touch they are. So, how did they even find out that this thing is out there?
That's a good question.
Some researcher had a list of psychedelics and put it on some bureaucrat's desk, and that was the end of that.
I have a thought, though. It could be attributable to Hunter S. Thompson.
Well, a lot of things are attributable to.
So,
sorry,
thanks.
Dad.
Do you know the story? Do you know the story about him with ibogaine?
No.
So let's see. It would have been 19. Well, no, this was post dated. I think, was it the 68 campaign or the 72 campaign? So Edwin Muskie, who I think was a senator from Maine, was running for president. And Hunter S. Thompson was following the campaign, and he wrote this article that appeared in Rolling Stone magazine where he said that Edwin Muskie was a known ibogaine junkie or something like that. It was like, and this,
Damn it, Hunter.
right? So
that's fantastic.
Yeah. So I'm not sure what year that was. I think
is fantastic.
My sense is it was actually probably after it was made on Schedule 1 thing. So.
There was a God, I just feel like an idiot saying this out loud, but there was a History Channel documentary that I watched a couple of years ago, and the reason that I feel like it has validity because there is a lot of bullshit on the History Channel. I mean, like the life and times of Jesus, come on, man. Right. But they did have this interesting documentary about the path to the level of illegalization that we have with controlled substances, and it was basically the argument for the whole documentary. The thesis, if you will, was under Nixon, they were looking for a way to shut down the counterculture because they were asking a lot of questions that they didn't want to answer.
Yeah.
They said, we can't go after their freedom of speech. Let's go after their drugs.
Makes sense to me.
And it's, I wonder, what is it about, I mean, you even went through this experience in your earlier days. Like, what is it about this world this world of people that are asking questions and psychedelics. Why is it that these two things are so they go hand in hand? You know, it's a tango. It's this yin and yang.
Yeah. Well, it sure gets you to question yourself in every way. You know, you had that intense experience.
I mean, it's a chicken or the egg question, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
What is it that comes first?
Yeah, how do you get the idea that I'm gonna try LSD?
Yeah.
You've already got to have a little bit of a seed of like, I'm gonna mess with the system. You know, so.
But
yeah.
So ibogaine, what's next for it? What's the plan? As far as MAPS is concerned, as far as you're aware, is there a plan for further studies? There
isn't right now, although I'm saying that, and I'm actually also helping to plan a study that doesn't have funding yet and doesn't have the full proposal yet. But there is no plan. Right now, what's happening is that I and the guy who's running the study in New Zealand are writing the research articles, and they're going to be coming. We're going to submit them for publication in the next couple of months. I'm hoping before Burning Man, we'll send that thing in, and publish or die. And then the New Zealand study is hopefully going to appear in the same journal. We're hoping to get them back to back in the same journal, and then after that, I think that the people at MAPS will be willing to talk about what's next. So right now, they just want us to get the damn articles done. Yeah. So
were you collecting trip stories from people?
Yes, and that was actually one of the. I see that as actually being one of the things that didn't work with the study. We were asking people to give a brief description of their experiences. We just give them a couple pieces of paper and some pencils and pens and crayons and draw a picture or write about your experience. And I'd say one in 8 or so really gave us good, rich descriptions, and most people just said, "I saw babies," like that. So there wasn't a lot of data from that.
Does it feel like, from the information that you have?
Yeah.
Because I can say, like with DMT, the experience that I've generally observed is that it's not necessarily that most oftentimes you see something very clearly. It's that it's almost like this knowing just kind of downloads into you. Like you just kind of know a thing.
That's so cool.
It's thank you for that. Yeah. You kind of just know something all of a sudden that you didn't know before, and it's not like you watch it like a movie.
Yeah.
But it sounds like with ibogaine, there have been more experiences where people really are watching it like a movie.
Yes, I think that's more typical for ibogaine. On the other hand, people do. I think they download information from people, characters they meet in those waking dreams, and it could be people from their past. It could be looking at a past experience in a new light, or But I think people do have those kind of aha moments with ibogaine as well. But it's more like the watching a movie sort of thing too, and getting life lessons from that in a really compacted time frame.
Do people ever make contact with entities the way that people do with DMT from time to time?
Yes. I haven't heard that very much from the people in the study, although there was one person who had an encounter with Jesus, and he was Muslim. So
Muslim Jesus?
Yeah, the Muslim Jesus showed up. He's like, you know what? I'm not Christian, I'm Muslim.
Yeah.
Now, this guy actually went through a conversion experience of sorts. I mean, he wasn't like, I believe, but he did start going to a Christian church. He's married to a woman who's Christian, and then before that he wasn't going to church, but after that he did, So.
How, for lack of a better description, pleasant would you say the ibogaine experience is or can be?
If 0's horribly unpleasant and 10 is blissful, I would say that for a lot of people, the intensity of it is more like a 3 than but some people have more happy experiences with it too, I think. And also, I can't say that I can back this up with the data that I've got, but it's a psychedelic experience. It's a trip of sorts, right? And so I would think that just like with mushroom trips and acid trips, you might go through parts that are you've got a lot of anxiety or a lot of regrets, or you're really wrestling with questions, and you have a breakthrough, and like then I see it, and then you have that happy ending. So
Proof cactus.
yeah. So
why haven't you ever gone through the full thing?
I haven't had the right opportunity at the right time. People have said, "Come to my clinic, and you can have the full-on experience." The first one who said that to me was Claire, who had the clinic in Tijuana, and then she moved, and now she's much further away. The offer still stands, but I haven't gotten down to her clinic. And the second clinic director offered the same thing, but I didn't really want to do that experience with him. I just didn't feel right about that. So.
What was it about it that didn't feel right?
I didn't fully trust him. So hopefully he's not listening to this podcast.
Yes, our audience extends to clinic managers all over the world.
That's who we've been advertising to prominently. Is this because from a lot of what you're describing and some conversations that I've had since we booked this show, we were having conversations with some of our friends about this, and the general consensus seemed to be that it's not something that you're particularly excited about trying out because it feels like with like DMT or ayahuasca, like there's so many different ways that it can go, whereas with ibogaine it feels like the general story is like you're gonna get your ass kicked.
And then there is that, and that's really why I didn't want to do it with just anybody, and Claire, she's got a great deal of warmth. I trust her. I love her. She's great. And, and also, I could probably experience any trip if, good old serotonin is there with me. She's probably the best guide I know. But yeah, there's that, that my fear of what's going to happen here, and I've experienced that with other really potent hallucinogens.
How many unpleasant trips do you think you've had?
One.
Okay.
Yeah, it was an acid trip that there were parts of it that were really great. And this is what I'm talking about. So ibogaine's a tryptamine, just like LSD is. And I think there's a certain it's a family, and the tryptamines will kind of wrestle you to the ground and make you struggle at times. Whereas phenethylamines, MDMA, 2CB, things in that family, they're much nicer to you. You're gonna be like, life is great, But that's what I kind of figure might happen with ibogaine, and it's gonna say, why didn't you do that, or
why did you drink that beer last week?
Why did you drink that beer?
See, the more you talk about it, the more I'm like, yeah, I'm down. Like, if I had to weigh the balance between like a bad ibogaine kicking my ass trip and smoking for another 26 years, I'm down. I'm down.
And you can see, people who are wanting to rid themselves of heroin addiction. Oh man!
If I was a heroin addict, I'd be down.
Yeah. So people talk about the fact that every once in a while someone dies when they're doing this treatment. That's not going to deter someone who is suicidal. That's not going to deter someone who thinks this drug is killing me. I'm going to, but yeah. For FDA clearance, you need to have that safety. Even if there isn't, even if our current treatments don't do anything really, they just switch you over to another addiction, right? Yeah. So
exactly. Thank you for coming to my thesis. That's all I'm talking about.
Like I kind of feel like I would be down so that I can kind of. Do you get to choose which addiction it's going to attack? Or does it attack all addictive things in your system? Because I think I have a food addiction. Yeah. The amount of time that I spend.
Food is not listed in the things that it is used to treat.
That's what I'm wondering. Is that not considered an addiction?
The most common question I've gotten from people actually is, does it treat eating disorders? Yeah. And not that I'm saying you have an eating disorder, but I've had people come up to me after conference talks or email me and say, can you treat an eating disorder with this? And the answer is I don't know, and that's my current understanding.
Addictions feed serotonin.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
That cigarettes do, or the same way that heroin does.
That's a good point.
They feed your serotonin receptors the same way. You get the same pleasure burst from a chocolate bar in your brain chemicals that you do from heroin.
Yeah.
Now
Different
this
extremes.
is where I wonder if the difference is, because I can tell you, after my first DMT trip, I meditated and journaled like a motherfucker, and I mean I already was like before it. I was meditating for years before, and I feel like a lot of what the DMT trip is it took a lot of the things that I was observing about myself, and it downloaded them into my system.
Yeah.
So I was making this general progress towards a place of light, and it's almost like it was on dial-up, and then the DMT all of a sudden was cable modem, like download.
Wow.
Right.
And so one of the things that I observed about the experience is this my thing?
that?
It's
So
not
you
me,
know
because I'm totally on airplane.
No, you know what it is? It's the iMessenger on my computer. Go away.
No one talk to your computer.
It's my cousin. When like 17 text messages come in at the same time, it's my cousin.
Right, you're gonna love this.
Yeah.
Look who I got. Who I got a
Is it
text
serotonin?
from, and look what she said.
Insist the interviewer call you Kingpin.
Don't do it.
I'm gonna do that. Kingpin is fine. I'm doing it for you, serotonin. Kingpin. Oh, by the way, a helicopter's flying overhead all of a sudden.
It happens.
They won't see us down here.
Yeah.
They don't know what we're talking about unless they have special pre-podcast airing.
Sirens, radar, or something.
That would be pretty interesting. So, so I'm sorry. So with my DMT experience, after I finished my trip, I basically was keeping, for the coming weeks, I was keeping a list of all the changes that I felt in my body.
Oh, yeah.
Like one of them, for example, was that I was told within the year previous to having that trip that apparently I'd been clenching my jaw a lot, and that's why I need to get crowns on all my teeth. And what I experienced with the DMT was that it almost like went through my body and released all this anxiety and muscle tension that I've had building up, for the past 3 decades.
Wow.
I felt my posture change. And after my dentist had told me about the need for crowns, I started bringing my awareness to that. So every morning I'd wake up and I'd bring my awareness to my jaw, and I would relax my jaw. And I'd remember every morning it was clenched.
Yeah.
I was clenching them all night. After the DMT trip, that completely stopped.
Wow.
I'd wake up in the morning with a relaxed jaw and a smile.
Yeah.
And so one of the things was with food. It brought my awareness to, I feel like the long and short of it is what I felt like was that the DMT removed a physical addiction that I had in my body towards food, but the memory of it is still there. So I'm not getting the same high. I was like chasing the dragon with, pizza on my bed at 9:30 p.m.
Yeah.
But the memory of that entire experience of laying down on my bed and having the computer on and having ice cream in front of me and having this whole routine, this whole process. So I wonder if it's almost like a similar thing with like cigarettes. Like the smoke might repulse you, but you still, the experience of hanging out with your friends and having this thing in your finger, like I do right now.
Yeah.
Like keep it with me, like just for fun.
Yeah. So,
So I wonder like how much of that with addiction comes to play, like the experience of the addiction versus the actual serotonin boost of that substance getting into you.
Yeah.
All those things. That's why a huge portion of current standard drug treatment is the therapist and the counselors trying to convince the client, the patient, to completely distance themselves from relationships, from situations, from places they used to go, things
Triggers.
they used to do, anything that might be that trigger, that hand to mouth of your cigarette, that whatever. There's a huge part of currently accepted practice in drug and alcohol treatment that is basically like, your whole old life is gone, walk away from it, don't go back.
Yeah.
Up to and including your family, like physical blood relations. Like if your family was part of your drug taking habit, you're supposed to walk away.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to, as counselors, we're supposed to encourage these people to walk away from the things that could be their support system and go face the anxiety of going clean and creating an entirely new support system. It's why it's part of why our system is broken. It's part of why most people who go through drug treatment go right back to their drug within 6 months. Within 6 months, most people, and it's we wouldn't have an obesity problem in this country. I mean, I'm a girl to talk. if you could be like, okay, you know what, chocolate's super bad for me, I'm gonna stop eating it now.
Yeah.
and then be done.
Yeah.
It
But
feels
I walked
logical.
into your house, Arash. I walked into your house today and I was like, thinking about the first time I came here, sitting on your floor, eating cookies, drinking milk, and eating pistachios until like whatever the fuck time in the morning that was.
Yeah, it was my birthday. Like 3 in the morning, we sat here and ate chocolate chip cookies.
Chocolate cookies and milk after the bar.
Nice.
And that was like, and it was, I don't hang out at the house that much, but as soon as I walked in the door, I started to sit in the same spot on the floor and be like, all right, cookie time. That's where I like cookies. Just our brains are wired for repetitive process.
Oh, yeah.
We do the things well that we do over and over and over again. I'm a real good smoker. I can smoke in the rain, not get my cigarette wet, because I do it all the time.
Yeah.
You know, if I was you've seen me with a bottle of whiskey.
Yeah.
I'm real good at drinking whiskey. I mean, we're wired for that.
Yeah.
That's how our brains work.
I wonder where your thoughts on that, Kingpin, on sort of like what else should go into what would be your ideal ibogaine regimen and plan? What do you think would be in an ideal world? It's legal. There's clinics in the United States. What do you think would be the most effective way to administer it and follow up on it?
Wow. I like the way that the most clinics that I am familiar with do it in terms of the actual treatment, but I do think that there could be that ritual element to it, that there could be more of a ritual process to it that would help people, guide them through that process and get them to a place where they think, okay, I'm a new person now. But yeah, what Meg's talking about, changing your life from a psychological, and social standpoint,
ritual,
right? And so after the treatment, they've got to stay away from those things that are going to trigger their addictive behavior.
Unless they go through the therapy
that
teaches them to how CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is
it's not cock and ball
it's
torture.
Also that it just depends on which side of it you're talking to.
Right. Okay. Right. So here we're talking about
now we're talking about
not cup and ball torture.
Cock and ball torture is a whole different thing. We can have a podcast about that another time.
Oh, okay.
Cognitive behavioral therapy teaches your brain to rewire itself. So that you don't actually have to walk away from those situations. You recognize them as triggers, and you have been taught or taught yourself or worked through a process that changes how you think about that trigger.
Yeah, so thank you, because that's really, I think, the most important thing after treatment is to have some kind of ongoing therapy. You've got to have something that's integrated with the treatment, right?
Yeah, let's get that moth. Yeah, we have a moth.
And that's what is most sorely lacking from most people who get ibogaine treatment. And one of the main reasons for that is that they're getting the treatment in a different country than where they live.
Doctor and be like, I had some ibogaine and now I need therapy.
Yeah. And the situation in New Zealand is different in that it's legal to prescribe there, so people can, they live in Dunedin, they can get their treatment in Dunedin, and they're not very far away from where they got their treatment. My friend and colleague Jeff Noller, who runs the study in New Zealand, has said that he thinks that the fact that they are able to integrate their care, their health care, is really important, because you've got the medical doctors, their primary care physician, anybody else who's taking care of that person who's responsible for caretaking is on board with the ibogaine treatment and is aware of what's going on and is going to work in ways that are most beneficial. Whereas here, you went to Mexico and you did what?
Yeah.
Well,
they have.
I'll send you over here for some detox.
They have a. I imagine part of the reason for that is because New Zealand still has a stronger connection to their shaman culture in a way that we don't here in the United States. We're very deeply disconnected from that. It's that sort of European mindset, if you will, further and further away from where that came from. So New Zealand. So New Zealand could potentially be at the forefront of where we can go with shaman influenced addiction therapy.
I think so. And
and we've already kind of seen some of. To me, it's a little reminiscent of like John Kabat-Zinn wrote Full Catastrophe Living and kind of brought mindfulness meditation to like the Zen mindfulness meditation to Western medicine. But somebody still had to find a way to bridge that gap. So it's not like this weird, scary shaman thing, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, let's not scare the white people. Really, that's what it comes down to.
Scare the white people.
Not
Yes.
scaring the white people.
Not scaring
The white people. There you go. So
Yeah.
we just have to cheers. I mean, really, that's what it all comes down to. Let's
With
find
a brown ale, Indian brown ale,
Yes.
for that matter.
And it's interesting too, because I mean, coming back to our community here, it is a community that there's a lot of white people that have embraced the brown.
Yes, right.
There's, I mean, even just down to like the art style and the choice in clothing and music. I mean, there's a lot of influence from the old world. It's almost like come around full circle.
Yeah, indeed.
I had said earlier that we're going to come back to the art thing, and you know, we didn't really in the course of the ibogaine, but I can say just with psychedelics. And please correct me if I'm dramatically wrong on this, but my understanding on some of the new ways that they're looking at them is that we used to think that it's lighting up parts of the brain, and it's kind of doing the opposite. It's kind of shutting certain parts down, and there's this information that's flooding in, and it seems like the brain, there could be an argument. I mean, from what I understand, it's very early on this thought process, but there could be an argument that the brain has evolved to kind of be a filter of information, so we don't walk off a cliff. I guess it goes back to sort of some of the experiences that you've had and your understanding with psychedelics as a whole. Yeah. Do you feel that that's what it's doing? Do you feel that that's maybe connected to where the art comes from after you get into psychedelics?
To sort of shut down the filters and letting... Yes, I do. Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. I don't know that it's turned me into an artist, but, you know, I'm still kind of a geek.
Yeah. Well, you said that you were discovering the artist within. Yeah.
And I got to say, I've done some things I would consider to be artistic. I've been a musician for most of my life, but when I started out going to Burning Man, I didn't think I'm an artist, you know. But I play music, you know. I can, you know, but you know, I've done some much wackier things since starting to go to Burning Man.
Yeah. It's, you know, it's my thought on it. And this is a very spiritual path that I've been on, is that it's, I realized that I think ultimately we're all artists. Like, we're all creators. The instant that we download into this human body, as soon as we start moving our limbs, we want to start creating shit. I want to draw something. I want to build something.
Right. Yeah.
And it seems like that's where... and then immediately, as you start to integrate into society, society starts beating that out of you. So I think it's really, for me, it's extra fascinating that you're doing like this kind of research, because I mean, my ultimate agenda is for the entire world to accept what you've accepted about your experiences as well, which is that you can create art. And that is that conversation with the divine, and that is the spirituality that can come out of it. And in addition to that, we can study some shit and potentially help some addicts.
Yes.
All those things.
All those things. All of them at the same time.
Yeah, and save the planet. You know, that'd be a nice little side benefit.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
Kingsley, how can people get a hold of you if they have questions?
Well, I can be reached by my Gmail account, which is tom.k.brown@gmail, or tkbrown@ucsd.edu is my work address. So
beautiful. And where can people look up the studies? Should they just keep it abreast of maps?
Yeah, well, there's www.maps.org is the good place to look, and they do have some pages on ibogaine, but they're also studying lots of other interesting chemicals. Yeah, so go to maps.org. And look at that stuff. That's a good place to go.
And how can people support MAPS on this mission?
You can become a member of MAPS, and then, or you can just contribute to MAPS. And if you want to really contribute to a particular kind of research, you can do that. There have been people who've contributed specifically to ibogaine research. Right now, I think the highest priority project that MAPS has going on is their study of MDMA for PTSD, and that's fantastic. They've got just great results, and they've expanded that into they've got many sites that they're going, And clinical trials are expensive, and that's why they are right now. Is they're moving this to a phase where they're going to be able to say, look, this stuff works, and it's going to become a legal psychotherapeutic substance in the next 15 years or so, and they can speed that up by contributing to MAPS, going to their conferences.
MAPS. That's amazing.
Yeah,
we started out at the raves, and now we're gonna help some people with PTSD.
Yes. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Kingpin, thank you so much for joining us.
You're quite welcome.
We gotta get serotonin on here.
Oh yeah,
definitely.
Yes,
that would be that sounds like that's gonna be an amazing
and I'll
conversation.
text her while she's on.
Okay, yes, let's do that. Give her a nickname. Thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome.
And there you have it. The amazing Kingsley, Dr. Brown. You can tweet me directly at Mr. Arash. That's spelled MRARASH. And when discussing the show, please do use the hashtag #BurnerPodcast. Shows are up on Libsyn and SoundCloud first. Libsyn is the broadcasting platform. It doesn't have the best player, but they're the ones who send it out to iTunes. SoundCloud has perfect quality, and that's where you can download the show and save it for your archives. Then it gets on iTunes and Stitcher and TuneIn.com and some other places that I've stopped keeping track of. Leave some reviews on iTunes or any one of those. You could either leave a 5-star rating or a 3-star rating. Those are the two options you have. I better not fucking see a 4-star rating or I will lose my shit. You watch yourself. Our intermission music is by Duckman. Check out his music at duckmansd.bandcamp.com. And if you're a musician in the community, tweet your music to our music editor, Navjeet, on Twitter. He's at @IamNavjeet. The Burner Podcast theme song is America's Horse with No Name remix, produced by Joman. Check out his stuff at soundcloud.com/DJ Joman. This episode is produced by Meg King. If you have questions or suggestions for future guests, shoot them over to Meg King. She is on Twitter at @MegKing. That Meg King. Our online editor is Tanasi. He writes and curates the blog. You can reach out to him by shooting a message directly to him over at burnerpodcast.com under the contact page. Hope you'll join us next time. We do release new episodes on the first and third Wednesdays of the month. So until next time, love and light and all that other crap. Good night.